What's up, TKO Nation? Welcome back to the TKO Podcast. Make sure you tune in.
Welcome back, folks, to Technical Knockout, the MMA Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Hussein, and today we are talking about UFC Perth. Carlos Ulberg versus Dominic Reyes. Now, we've got a pretty fun main event, I would say, here, and then the card kind of stops there. The UFC does this time and time again when they go on the road. They'll stack the card with people from the region, not necessarily the highest level of talent that they have in the UFC, not necessarily giving them the best fights, but rather making sure that people will pay to see it in person, so they put local fighters, because everybody wants to see their cousin fight. You know what I mean? I'm sure they would also want to see like a top 5 bantamweight fight or a top 5 lightweight fight, but that's where we stand in 2025's UFC. But let's take the good where we can and take a look at this pretty fun matchup at the top of the bill between two light heavyweights at completely different points in their career. We have Carlos Ulberg on one side, who is a surging contender at the ripe young age of 34. And we have Dominic Reyes, who is a guy who's coming back, I mean, Reyes probably had some of the worst luck. I mean, I wouldn't even know to call it luck, but he just had a really bad stretch there for a while. He beat John Jones. He beat him 3-2. The judges gave it to Jones. And what commenced after that was just a string of really bad losses for Dominic Reyes, losing to Jan Blachowicz for the vacant title, losing to Yuri Prochazka, devastating knockout, losing to Ryan Spann. I mean, come on, it was sad to watch. So it's good to see Reyes get back in the win column. Now he's on a 3-fight winning streak, and they're all knockouts. So, say what you will about the level of competition that he's been beating. Guys like Dustin Jacoby, Nikita Krylov, and Anthony Smith, certainly not contenders in this division as it stands, but these are great victories for Reyes at this point in his career to build that confidence back up, and we're going to see how far that confidence can take him on Saturday when he takes on the surging contender in Carlos Ulberg. Carlos Ulberg, for those of you who are not familiar, fights out of the CKO City Kickboxing Gym with Israel Adesanya and those folks over there, Eugene Behrman as well. What can you say about Ulberg? Ulberg is huge. He's really big for the division. He's really athletic, and he's a good striker. He's a patient counter striker, almost to a fault sometimes. He loves moving on the back foot. He loves throwing his check hook. His left kick to the body is pretty solid too. His left straight. But that check hook is really what's made him his bread and butter in the UFC. And he's coming off of his biggest win in terms of name value against Jan Blachowicz. But it was a fight that was really lackluster, to say the least. Before that, he did convincingly beat Volkan Oezdemir, and he knocked out Alonzo Menefield. But that Blachowicz fight was not that convincing, I felt that Blachowicz did enough to win, but it was just a really close, really shitty fight, honestly. And I'm not sure if that kind of performance, if he replicates that kind of performance, if it'll be good to beat Dominic Reyes. It's not like Reyes is so good. It's not like Reyes is a lot better than Jan Blachowicz, honestly. I mean, I would pick Blachowicz to beat him at this stage of both of their careers. But this Reyes that we see in 2025, who has the confidence, who's always had that athleticism and, fighting instinct, we'll see if Ulberg can do enough to beat him, My opinion, I think Ulberg should win this fight. I think he's the more talented fighter at this stage of their career. I think that the grappling kind of cancels itself out in this fight. I don't see Reyes going for the wrestling much here. I don't see Ulberg going for the wrestling at all. I expect this fight to play out on the feet. And, both guys are sort of counterpunchers, so we might be looking at a stinker here. I think taking Ulberg by decision or points is a pretty smart bet here. Yeah, I think Ulberg by decision is a pretty smart bet here. I saw odds on it on FanDuel for like plus 500, which I think is insane. I could see Ulberg getting a knockout at some point, but, Reyes in those fights that he got knocked out against Span, against Blachowicz, against Prohashka, he was really fighting the firefight in those fights. In these last few fights against Smith, against Krylov, against Jacoby, he had more of a passive approach, and I mean that led to him getting 3 knockouts. So I mean, maybe if he fights that kind of fight, he'll have some success here. If he forces Ulberg to be the aggressor, I could see him having some success with that left straight down the middle. Ultimately, I don't really expect this fight to finish within the 5 rounds. If it does, I think it'll be more of an indication that Dominic Reyes' chin is truly gone, and Ulberg puts him out with some check hook or something like that. But more often than not, I think this fight's going to be a lot of pitter patter on the outside. I think Ulberg's kicks to the legs, to the body, are going to be fortuitous for him in this matchup. And I think, I'm going to take Ulberg. I'm going to take Ulberg over 2.5. I could see him getting a finish at some point, 3rd, 4th, 5th, but I think more often than not, this fight will go to decision. And I think Ulberg will just do enough to win and not necessarily make a statement, as he is one to do. This is his first main event spot, from what I know, and from what I've seen of the guy, big pressure moments, big pressure fights don't necessarily lead for him to have a outstanding performance. More often than that, they lead to him having a measured and almost tepid or timid performance where he's just trying to secure the win, and I expect that to happen this weekend. Imagining Dominic Reyes going to 5 rounds with Carlos Ulberg is a little strange because, I just don't know if Reyes is that guy anymore. But we're going to see what happens, I think either way it should be a fun one to watch. Sorry, guys, little allergies getting to me. But yeah, so co-main event, you have Jack Jenkins taking on Ramon Tavares. I'm not too familiar with Ramon, but I am very familiar with Jack Jenkins. He, kind of starts slow, throws combinations, goes to the body often, which I love, and then really turns it up in the 2nd and 3rd round. They have him as a big favorite in this fight, so, I think maybe betting on him to win by knockout in the 2nd or 3rd would be a good bet. I'd imagine they're setting him up with a good matchup here to win in front of the hometown crowd. Then you have Jimmy Crute versus Ivan Erslan. Now, if this is the guy that I'm thinking of, this is that guy that throws a bunch of wild overhands. The bald-headed dude that fought, yep, that's exactly who I'm thinking of. He fought, was it, Iwan Kutalaba? Yeah, and Kutalaba beat him. Crute should beat this guy. He should be able to take him down and punish him on the ground. Crute has a really good submission game. And, he just needs to kind of get the fight there to get it going. So, I think he can do it. I think he's the more talented fighter than Erslan. Erslan, on the other hand, is a bit of a spaz man, and Crute has been susceptible to the spaz in the past. So, for Erslan, it's either knockout or bust, I think. For Crute, I think he has a couple ways to win this fight, but I would lean towards the submission. Next, you have Jake Matthews versus Neil Magny. This is one of those traps, Neil Magny, super inconsistent. It's kind of an IQ test more than anything at this point of his career. Don't fall into the clinch with him. Don't, Phil McKenzie on the Heavy Hand show called him Hypnotoad, which I think is a great way of putting it. He kind of, lulls guys into sleep, into a rhythm where he can put them against the cage, where he can clinch with them and, outstrike them in the clinch and outwork them there. He kind of like invites you to clinch him, and that's where he'll win the fight and drain you. So do you think Jake Matthews will fall victim to the Hypnotoad? I'm not sure. I think Matthews is a wildly inconsistent fighter. He's somebody who one fight looks like a world champion and the next fight looks like a regional level fighter, so it's hard to put a pin on this fight on either side of the coin, but they have Magny as a plus 285, which is crazy. Taking a stab on Magny at these underdog odds, I wouldn't be, shocked if he gets it done. I also wouldn't be shocked if Jake Matthews looks like a fucking world beater here. Like, if he takes him down and just submits him in 2 rounds, I wouldn't be shocked. If he knocks him out at some point, I wouldn't be shocked. If he wins a decision just by clearly being the better fighter, Again, it's not shocking. You really can't be surprised with any outcome in a Magny fight in 2025. So in that case, I think I'm just going to stay away from this one. Then you got Tom Nolan versus Charlie Campbell. I'd like to think that they're giving Tom Nolan a gimme fight here, and Charlie Campbell, who I'm not familiar with. Let me see if I recognize him from his. Oh, he fought Trevor Peak. Yeah, you got to imagine that this is a gimme fight for Tom Nolan. So blast Tom Nolan probably round one, considering how he usually wins. Then you got Justin Taffa versus Louis Sutherland. Who is Louis Sutherland, man? They're really bringing in anybody just so the Taffa brothers can get a victory in the UFC in this point of their career. So don't overlook it, or don't overthink it. That's probably what's going on here. If this Sutherland guy has an inch of wrestling, of cardio, of leg kicks, he should be able to take this fight. But knowing the UFC matchmakers and considering that we're in Australia, you've got to imagine that they're trying to give Taffa a win here. So, slam Taffa first round knockout. Next, you got Navajo Sterling versus Rodolfo Bellato. This is another interesting fight, and I feel that Sterling and Ulberg are very similar. Both guys, you can see that they're super talented, but there seems to be some kind of mental hangup or technical wall that they're hitting. I don't know what it is, but in Sterling's case, he was coming up knocking dudes out in like 2 minutes. Once he faced competition, it was like this guy doesn't seem potent at all, and Ulberg on the other hand, just very timid in some of these performances. So yeah, I mean, so Sterling, he should be able to finish people quickly, but seems to be a little reluctant and hesitant at sometimes. Just doesn't seem that ferocious, to be honest with you. I know they sound crazy, but if you watch the guy fight, you'll see what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Like you can look at his record and be like, "Oh, he's so good," but you watch him fight and you see a guy who's just trying to survive in there. It feels like, and he's taking on Rodolfo Bellato, who is really tough. His head is like a brick. He keeps it in one spot the whole time. He has good jiu-jitsu. He has good straight punches. But more than anything, he's just a tough SOB. And I think that this fight will go to decision more often than not. If not, at least go over 1.5 rounds here. I think Sterling can win this fight on the scorecards if he is the cleaner striker. I think Bellato can win this fight on the scorecards if he can get this fight to the ground. But ultimately, I do see this fight going over 1.5, so that's where I'm going to put my bet on this one. Next, you have Loma Lookbonmi versus Alexia Tainara. I don't know what I'm missing here. I must be missing something. Loma Lookbonmi is coming in as a plus 200 underdog against Alexia Tainara, who has exactly one win in the UFC, and it's against Molly McCann. Granted, she did run through Molly McCann, but what is it about Molly McCann that makes you think she can do that? What is it about Loma that makes you think that Alexia can do that same thing to her? From what I've seen, Loma is very hard to take down. She has great balance from years and years of Muay Thai, and she's good at punishing girls who try to enter the clinch with her. Sure, she's been susceptible to very strong wrestlers in the past, like a Lupi Godinez, but is Alexia Tainara that good of a wrestler, or is Molly McCann that shit, and at that stage of her career, that shit? I believe Loma Lookbonmi can get it done this weekend. She is Thai. She's fighting out of Thailand, which if you haven't looked at a map in a long time, is not that far from Australia. So she's going to be coming in, relatively well rested, I'd imagine. And Tainara, on the other hand, is coming from Brazil, which is on the other side of the world. So, if Tainara does not adjust to the Australian time zone, if she does not come here early, which as a fighter who is relatively new in the sport, it may be hard. I don't know her family background. Maybe they're rich. I don't know. But, logic prevails that it's probably she's coming in here a week in advance tops, whereas Loma Lookbonmi can come here as soon as she wants because she's in Thailand, which is, right there. This is just something to think about in this fight, and I'm trying to convince myself because I really like Loma and I want her to win here, and I love making money on a big dog, especially in women's MMA, especially when it's somebody that I've seen and I believe in. So give me Loma here. Maybe it's a biased pick, but I just don't see what the odds makers are seeing in Tainara to make her such a big favorite. Sure, she's gotten a lot of submissions in the first round. Loma's only been submitted once in her career though, and it was very early in her career. Since then she's shown in rapidly improving ground defense. She even has improved her own takedown game, getting a few takedowns on Elise Reed, and I believe she even submitted Elise Reed, if I'm not mistaken. So give me Loma here. I think she should be the more punishing striker in the clinch. I think she should be able to stop the takedowns, and just kind of win this fight with damage and volume and power. And, I haven't seen Tainara go more than a round, so who knows what her cardio looks like in the second and third. I'll tell you what, Loma's cardio looks great, So give me Loma Lookbon me here. Next, you got Oban Elliott versus Jonathan McAuliffe. Now, I'm not too familiar with McAuliffe, but I am very familiar with Oban Elliott. He beat my buddy Basel Hafez. It sucked. It was hard to watch. It was really hard, really tough matchup for Basel. And then in his last fight, he fought the Korean Mike Tyson, I think the guy's name is. It's like Seung Ho Ko or something like that. And that guy looked phenomenal. He was a big underdog in that fight, and he beat the brakes off of Oban Elliott for 3 rounds. You've got to think that Oban is looking to bounce back here. You've got to think that he is looking to get back in the win column. And judging from his strength of schedule before that fight and the performances that he's had in the octagon, I think he's very capable of a bounce back. I think he got caught staring in that fight. I don't think he expected that guy to be as good as he was. That guy came in on short notice as well, if I'm not mistaken. And I think he kind of got caught with his pants down there, and I expect him to come back with some heat here against Jonathan McAuliffe. I don't know this guy McAuliffe. I haven't seen him fight. When did he last fight? Fought Kevin Jusay? I mean, come on, it's not that exciting of a victory. So, I mean, he's Australian. Oban, I'd imagine, is looking to get back in the win column here, so I'm going to ride with my boy. I guess he's my boy, but yeah, I'm going to ride with Oban here. I think he gets it done. Next, you got Cameron Roston versus Andre Petrosky. I don't know what to make of Petrosky at this stage, It's like the guy has a great jiu-jitsu game. He has a strong wrestling base. He has good power in his hands, but he just doesn't throw them that often, and when he gets hit back, it's like he can't take a punch. So I don't know the other guy, and I don't really believe in Petrosky, so I'm just going to stay away from this one. And then you got Josias Musasa versus Colby Thickness. They're really not giving Colby Thickness any breaks here with this matchup. He had his debut against Alexandre Pretoria, and now he's fighting Josias Musasa, who has looked really good up to this point. He got finished in his last fight where he missed weight as well, but before that, he's looked like a monster. I'm not sure that it'll be enough to beat the Thickness. And I'm a big fan of Colby because, he posts on the Reddit forums and stuff, and he seems like a good guy every time he engages. So I want to ride with my boy Thickness here, but this is not an easy fight. Musasa's a monster. So if Thickness can use his superior technique here, get this fight to the ground, or at least, keep the more tenacious Musasa at bay, then he could get a victory here on the scorecards, or even a submission or something. But if not, I'd expect Musasa to come in and try to take off Thickness's head. Next, you have Jamie Malarkey versus Rolando Bedoya. Bedoya going down to lightweight here. I love that for him. He looked a little bit pudgy at welterweight, so it seemed cut that weight. Hopefully it translates to a more inspired performance here. But ultimately, I am not going to bet on either one of these guys. I'm going to bet on the over in this fight. I think both of these dudes are so tough. Like, Malarkey is so tough. Bedoya is extremely tough. He took some huge punches from Chaos Williams in their fight. So I expect this fight to go to decision. I think both guys are super tough. I mean, I don't think either one really has a very deep submission game either, which is how I would imagine this fight gets finished if it does, considering the chins on both of these dudes. So, yeah, I'm going to take this fight to go over 2.5. And then you got Michelle Montague versus Luana Carolina. Both of them are trash. And Brando Parachich versus Alicia Ellison, a heavyweight curtain jerker. I don't know any of those guys, and we'll see how that goes. But that being said, let's go down the betting slip real quick. Main event, I'm going to take Ulberg. I just think the momentum is too much. Co-main event, I'm going to take Jack Jenkins over 1.5. I'm going to put Tom Nolan, round 1. I'm going to put Justin Tafa, round 1. I'm going to put Loma Lookbon me, money line. I'll put over 1.5 in the Sterling Bellato fight. I'm going to take my boy Oban Elliott. I think he bounces back here. And I'm going to take over 2.5 in the Bedoya Malarkey matchup. So we have 8 picks here. I know it sounds crazy because I wasn't so hot on the betting value on this card, but I do see a couple spots here. Maybe not great odds, but I think they're pretty safe. So one more time. Ulberg money line. Jenkins over 1.5. Tom Nolan, round 1. Justin Tafa, round 1. Bellato, over 1.5. Like, that fight to go over 1.5, I should say. Lomaluk Bon Mi, moneyline. Oban Elliott, moneyline. And then Malarkey, over 2.5 against Bedoya. Let's lock it in, baby. 8 picks for you. Use the round robin function, for God's sakes. You know what I mean? Do by 4, do by 3. And hopefully we make some money this weekend. I'm looking forward to it. Pretty good card, all things considered. The last few events that we've been on the road, that the UFC's been on the road, the French fighters swept, and then most recently the Mexican fighters swept at Noche UFC. So we'll see if the Australian fighters or Anzac fighters can do the same. We'll see what happens. Stay tuned for more shorts for my Signature Moves in MMA series. Stay tuned for more historical pieces down the pipeline. Check out the ones I've already put out, and I appreciate y'all. Thanks for the love. Thanks for the support. Have a lovely day. Peace out.